Alrighty, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's weather chat. I'm meteorologist Timmy Albertson. We got ourselves kind of an interesting little weather setup here, more or less, in the sense that that strong area of high pressure that moved across the central part of the U.S. over the weekend is now making its way off towards the East Coast, and as it does so, it is bringing a return of some warmer air back into some parts of the region. Let's start off here with a little bit of a look, though, over at the radar imagery, and you'll notice there are some winter weather advisories that are in effect around parts of Kansas City, going up towards Des Moines and a good part of the lower half of the Great Lakes region. Now, well, the reason for this actual winter weather, wow, let me try that again. The reason for this winter weather advisory, at least across this area, is because of the possibility for a little bit of freezing rain overnight tonight. But otherwise, what we're going to be seeing over the next couple of days is likely quite a few rounds of rain making their way across the Mississippi River Valley and into the Ohio River Valley too. But in the meantime, we still have the possibility for a little bit of freezing rain. So let's take a look here over at the temperatures down across parts of central Ohio. They're sitting in the mid 30s for the most part. Dew points hanging out right now in the mid 20s, even into the upper teens for some spots. But you'll notice here the winds are out of the southwest here. And basically, what's going to happen as we go through the evening and overnight tonight is these temperatures will drop down a little bit. For the most part, a lot of these places are hanging pretty much right around the freezing point, and it might even drop just a little bit more than that. However, while you might think that, if we have temperatures that are lower than 32 degrees, wouldn't that just mean it's going to be snow? Not necessarily, at least at the surface. You see, what actually is very interesting here about this kind of setup is that we see is more or less that if we flip over to the upper level chart here, we'll go ahead and pull that right up here. Let's look a little bit higher up into the atmosphere, only about a couple of thousand feet. But at this level, what we see here, all these red lines and all these little blue lines here. These blue lines are temperatures that are right at or below freezing, and these red lines are temperatures that are just a little bit above freezing or even more so above freezing, regardless of the fact the 32-degree line is about right here. There is on a high pressure off the East Coast, and it's bringing in this warm and moist air up in from the Gulf, and it's trying to bring it into parts of the lower Ohio River Valley. Now, what's going to happen as we go through the overnight tonight is those temperatures about a couple thousand feet above the ground may actually be above freezing, but the temperatures at the surface, because the cooler air tends to be a little bit stubborn sometimes, especially in some of the hilly countries of parts of Ohio, well, that colder air doesn't really want to advance quite as quickly down at the surface. So what happens is that warmer air has no choice but to go up and over it. And in this type of a setup, sometimes we can get a little bit of freezing drizzle or even a little bit of freezing rain to develop. Now, again, if temperatures are colder, we'd be talking about snow. This is called an inversion. A lot of our big winter weather events tend to be inversions, more or less. But with this setup here, what we do see is the colder air is trying to retreat, but not as quickly as some of that warmer air just a couple thousand feet above the ground is making its way in from the south there. So again, creates that little bit of an inversion there. And we're probably going to see, as mentioned, some light freezing drizzle trying to develop across this area overnight tonight, maybe going into early tomorrow morning. But then temperatures will warm enough that it'll likely just transition to maybe some rain showers. And then we're going to be seeing a few rounds of some rain showers. So it's probably not going to be a big freezing rain event, but it could make things a little bit slick and slippery overnight tonight, especially as you go into parts of southeastern Ohio. They got a lot of these little, rolling hills more or less, and in some of those valleys there, you can get that colder air to just kind of pull there a little bit. And it's actually kind of interesting if you drive around this area, especially when the winds are really calm at night. You can actually see that temperature inversion as you go up and down the hills. But this part of Ohio up here, very flat, my hometown area. And again, really what's happening here is that just that colder air is just not moving out quick enough as that warmer air aloft moves in here. Again, kind of a typical setup with this type of situation. So hence why we have all those winter weather advisories that are in effect. Let's take a look here over at our good friend, the latest weather map here. We'll see what else is going on. There's our high pressure off the East Coast. And we also have this little frontal boundary that was trying to push its way in. It does have some colder temperatures with it, but it's likely not really going to be able to advance much further. After all, the high pressure up here is just about as strong as the high pressure down there. So more or less just kind of well, I guess what do you say? A stalemate in who's going to be moving who. All right, we got our little frontal boundary across the eastern edge of the Rocky Mountains yet again there. We can see temperatures in the teens around this part of Montana into the 30s back out around here. But let's take a look down here yet again. We have that high pressure moving in some moisture. And as we go over the next couple of days, what we're going to see is that high pressure kind of sticking around in this area. And in doing so, it's going to allow for a few waves to kind of move up parts of the southern Mississippi River Valley and heading back into the Ohio River Valley. Let's kind of take a little bit of a look at it here as we move our way through the overnight hours. Again, there's some of that moisture making its way into the lower part of the Great Lakes. Temperatures, as mentioned at the surface, may be at freezing or just a couple degrees below freezing, but higher up, just a couple degrees above freezing. That'll be enough for at least a little bit of maybe some freezing drizzle. As we go into the day, though, that'll transition over to some rain. Now, what's interesting is back out across here, once we go into parts of upstate New York, that colder air is still rather entrenched, as a matter of fact. And what we're probably going to see here is as this moisture moves its way northwards, this will probably transition to a snow, possibly a steady snow for a good chunk of Tuesday afternoon and maybe into the evening. But much like the areas just down to the south, those temperatures are eventually going to warm, and we could see it transitioning back over to rain as we head into the day Wednesday. Meanwhile, you can see we'll have yet another wave of low pressure that's going to make its way out as we go into Tuesday night, heading into the day on Wednesday. That's also going to have no choice but to kind of go right in this little surface trough here of low pressure. Again, we have a high pressure up here, a high pressure over here. Low pressures cannot move a high pressure, so that moisture has no option but to kind of take the path of least resistance in this regard, and that is going to be right up through parts of the Ohio River Valley. So could see kind of again another wave of moisture as we head our way into the day on Wednesday. Again, temperatures here likely going to be too warm for snow. It'll likely just end up being rain, possibly a near steady rain. But then we could have yet another little wave that'll track its way up as we go into Wednesday night, heading into the day on Thursday, and then maybe even another wave as we go into the day on as we go into Thursday night and into the day on Friday. So looking like it's going to be kind of a rainy next couple of week, I guess I should say, next week, or the next rainy few days across parts of the Ohio River Valley as well as parts of the southern Mississippi River Valley. Now, the reason why we're not seeing much snow with this is because there isn't that access to colder air. A couple weeks ago, when we were taking a look at those low pressures, they at least had enough colder air to kind of latch onto to make it some snow. In this case, we're not going to be seeing that. The high pressure that has the colder air is way out of the way, and we can just more or less see this is just going to be a predominantly southeasterly wind flow across pretty much a good part of the eastern U.S. That's going to be keeping it as rain. Let's take a look up at the higher levels here. What's going on here is even though we have that little kind of disturbance pushing its way through, kind of back this up here a little bit, you can see it's not the strongest, and we still have that ridging taking place across a good portion of the eastern half of the United States. Or I guess not necessarily ridging, but we have this large ridge over here, and this is the part where we see that southwesterly flow. It's also where we see those low pressures like to develop. So again, long story short, everything in weather is connected, but this is kind of the upper level pattern. While we do have a trough here, does not have a lot of colder air. It's not that strong type of trough that we see. As a matter of fact, the 540 line is way all the way up here. So again, going to be a warmer air mass, even though there is a trough, and we tend to associate troughs with at least some cooler temperatures. Not the case with this one. Yes, it'll be somewhat cooler temperatures, but relatively speaking, still above average for this time of the year, and certainly warm enough to keep those temperatures well above freezing across parts of the south, across a good part of the eastern U.S. So that is the setup here as we go through the next couple of days. Otherwise, what lies beyond that? Well, unfortunately, we'll have to see exactly how much damage this does to some of the snow that's on the ground across parts of the upper Midwest. It's very possible we could lose a good portion of it, which means we could end up kind of back in a similar situation like what we had in December, where we lose that feedback loop. Again, in wintertime, you need snow on the ground that helps to keep things cold. That makes it much harder for warmer air to get itself entrenched into an area. It also really helps to, when those systems do move through it, they'll do so in the form of snow instead of rain. In December, we didn't really have that. We just had no snow, and it was pretty much every system that came through had no cold air to work with, and it ended up being rain. For the past few weeks, there has been at least enough snow, enough colder air in place with those low pressures when they do track through, have been able to produce some snow. But unfortunately, it looks like with this setup here, there might not be enough snow in some spots, and that'll gradually start eating away at that snow, and eventually could put us back into a position where we might be seeing above average temperatures, maybe even beyond this week, going into next week, and who knows, maybe a little bit further out too. We'll just have to wait and see. But overall, if nothing else, if it's at least going to be, as I always like to say, if it's going to be warm, then let it storm. So temperature is going to be above average. It might as well at least be raining. So that looks like that's going to be the case across parts of the eastern U.S. All righty, everyone. Well, a lot of information there for you, but I think we got through it all. So that'll do it for tonight, for tonight's weather chat. See you back here tomorrow evening at the usual time, and we'll talk, so see what else is going on. Other than that, hope you'll have a good rest of your evening, and as always, enjoy that weather.